You're mid. And I don't mean that in the facetious, you're not very attractive kind of way. I mean that in the broader sense of morality, you're fairly average, which is not necessarily making you a bad person, which is what I want to get into today. Moral mediocrity.
Well,
Let's
when I first started um, at the company, I was working in something that I thought would be helpful to society, looking at, using my knowledge and skill sets to identify pathways to mitigate extremism.
You may have heard of Cambridge Analytica back in 2018 when Wylie blew the whistle, revealing the impact they had on the 2016 presidential election and Brexit. Or maybe you heard about it through the Facebook data leaks that they took advantage of. It's also quite possible that you have never heard of them before, so let me start by giving some background on who they are. Essentially, they are a British-based private company that governments often hire to destabilize foreign nations, leaving them open to or setting them up for potential attacks and manipulation. Typically, this is from using psychological profiling to target members of a group that are susceptible to manipulation, then sending them messages that increase paranoia and risk of them sabotaging their group from the inside. You guys remember the FBI agent meme? This is one of the many things SCL was able to do. Quote, watching as someone toggled between looking up plantain recipes and watching porn, all while Nix laughed at them. Now is as good a time as any to talk about this man, Alexander Nix, the leader of SEL and a stereotypical businessman bully, treating his employees only slightly better than the millions of people Cambridge Analytica has taken advantage of. Robert Mercer is the main investor in Cambridge Analytica, which allowed Wylie and the rest of the research team to acquire the data. And then Steve Bannon, he was the first one to see the potential in the political elections. He later became an advisor to the Trump administration. These three individuals are the main people Wylie references as the individuals who were using Cambridge Analytica in the unethical ways in which it came to be, claiming they bullied and manipulated him into losing his own sense of morals during the process. Now I could go on and on about the details of everything Cambridge Analytica did, but I'll wrap it up by saying that they stole lots and lots of data. Then they used that data to specifically target Americans with manipulation that exponentially grew the alt-right and dissuaded many left-wing voters from going to the voting booths.
The problem at the time was that if you work in a company that is acquired and your new boss and everybody who's in charge has made a conscious decision to go down a path that you find morally wrong and arguably unlawful in certain contexts, it's not like you can go to HR and say, I'd like to put on my file that I disagree with what the company is doing.
You could have left.
I did.
The problem with Wylie is that he's an unreliable narrator. It's impossible to tell when he's being genuine and when he is just saying something that'll make himself look good. But running off of what he talks about in his book, he seems to be under the impression that his work is going to go towards some greater scientific purpose. It's going to be useful in studying sociology and psychology. In many ways it could have and it would have, but unfortunately he was working under SCL. Let's talk a little bit about ego. So this is something that Christopher Wylie is not going to reference in his book, but I think it's an important factor as to why he continued on for so long. Before coming to Cambridge Analytica and SCL, there were two other groups that denied him from working on this project that he was so passionate about. That was the Liberal Party in Canada and the Dem Libs in Britain. When he was finally introduced to an opportunity where he could study this with full reign, he wanted to prove that he could, and he wanted to prove that his weapon would work, in which he was incredibly successful, as we saw. It's something that I think is important to consider in other cases, where your own ego blinds you from considering the moral implications of what you're trying to do. You want to prove that you can, and you never stop to ask if you should. This all leads me to my main point, which is that I think asking the question of whether Christopher Wylie is a good or a bad person is just asking the wrong question. Christopher Wylie is a perfect example of a morally average person. Yes, he did a lot of bad things during his time at SCL, but he also did end up blowing the whistle. Not to say this excuses his actions, but I think this brings a more important point, which is that everyone is susceptible to betraying their own moral beliefs with the right conditions. And it doesn't make them necessarily a bad person, it just makes them human. As many of you may know, there are people studying AI right now who are currently creating something that is going to be used in, albeit some amazing ways, that could save lives. It could end up finding the cure for cancer or discovering a solution for global warming that we haven't yet considered. But there's also AI that are going to be used to make deep fakes and manipulate people, and potentially something that you see in TV as a dystopian future. And these people aren't seeing it that way, though. They're seeing the millions of ways it could be used in a beautiful and beneficial to society way. And little do they know that their actions may not lead them to be known as one of the greatest scientists of all time who revolutionized humanity, but it may end up making them something more adjacent to Oppenheimer or Christopher Wylie, someone who created something that became way bigger than themselves and not in a good way. I'm not someone to say that they should stop studying it altogether. Humanity has this weird quirk of creating problems for itself and then solving it later. But I do hope that these individuals take the time to stop and think about the potential moral implications of what they're creating. And that stopping to think doesn't prevent them from creating something great, but only gives them the confidence that what they're doing is not only right, but it's going to be great. And it's going to be meaningful in a positive way for humanity. I've been wanting to make video essays for a while now, and with this, I'll be taking that leap of faith. This moral mediocrity series is one that I'm excited about because I find it really interesting to talk about people not from the perspective of whether they're a good or a bad person, just based on what their actions are. And I think it's important because we can look at it in our own lives and when we might end up sacrificing our own morals in the future and use them as an example of what we might do to prevent being in a situation like that. I also look forward to making more videos with my computer science knowledge. I want to create some mods for Minecraft or some other video game footage, or maybe discussion about music. I really enjoy music. And I have some other ideas for videos I want to make in the future. So any amount of support and criticism is welcome. I know there's quite a few things I need to work on here, like my flow in speaking, broadening my vocabulary, and just general editing and camera positions. I'll probably invest in a better camera sooner or later. And yeah, so, if you want to support, like, comment, and subscribe, and I appreciate that greatly. Have a nice day, everyone. Toodles.